The night everything changed. The Flamingo Hotel's showroom glittered under crystal chandeliers on March 14, 1957. It was a Thursday night, and Dean Martin was midway through a 2-week residency that had every seat filled and a waiting list that stretched around the block. The air was thick with cigarette smoke, expensive perfume, and the kind of electric energy that only happens when you pack 400 people into a space meant for 300. Dean was working the crowd like only he could. His voice was smooth as aged whiskey, his timing impeccable. He'd just finished a rendition of Memories Are Made of This that had women dabbing tears from their eyes and men trying to figure out how one guy could make it all look so effortless. The applause was still thundering when the doors at the back of the room swung open with enough force to make heads turn. Vincent the Hammer DeLuca had arrived. Now, Vincent wasn't called a hammer because he was good with tools. He'd earned that nickname through 20 years of enforcing for the Chicago outfit, and his reputation preceded him like a freight train. At 53 years old, he was barrel-chested and broad-shouldered, with hands the size of dinner plates and a face that looked like it had lost arguments with brick walls. But it was his eyes that really got you. Cold, calculating, the eyes of a man who'd seen everything and been impressed by nothing. Vincent didn't just walk into the Flamingo that night. He swaggered. His entourage followed. 3 younger men in expensive suits trying to match his swagger and failing. They were shown to a front row table that, mysteriously, had remained empty all evening despite the packed house. Funny how that works when certain people make reservations. Dean registered the entrance. You'd have to be blind not to, but he was a professional, and professionals don't let late arrivals throw them off their rhythm. He nodded in Vincent's direction, a small gesture of acknowledgement, and launched into his next number. If Dean felt any tension about performing in front of a man whose business card might as well have read professional intimidator, he didn't show it. The first hour passed smoothly. Dean sang, joked, told stories that had the audience hanging on every word. He had this gift for making everyone in the room feel like he was performing just for them, like they were old friends catching up over drinks. It was magic, pure and simple. Vincent, for his part, was drinking. Not sipping, drinking. The waitresses kept bringing scotch, and Vincent kept making it disappear. His voice grew louder with each glass. His laughs became booming interruptions. By the time Dean was an hour and 15 minutes into his set, Vincent had stopped being merely present and had become a presence. When power meets pride, Dean was telling a story, something lighthearted about a mishap during rehearsals, when Vincent's voice cut through the room like a chainsaw through velvet. Hey, Dino, enough with the boring stuff. Give us something with some muscle. The room tensed. You could feel it, like the air pressure had suddenly changed. Dean paused, his smile never wavering. He'd dealt with hecklers before. Every performer has. The key is to acknowledge without escalating, to deflect with humor, to keep the show moving. Well, sir, Dean said smoothly, I appreciate your enthusiasm. Tell you what, this next one's got plenty of muscle. It's called That's Amore, and if you don't feel in your chest, I'll eat my tuxedo. Laughter rippled through the crowd. The tension broke. Dean had handled it perfectly. The band kicked into the opening bars, and Dean's voice filled the room with that familiar, beloved melody. Crisis averted. Show goes on. Except Vincent wasn't done. 20 minutes later, Dean had shifted gears. He was doing something he rarely did in Vegas, getting personal. He was talking about his childhood in Steubenville, Ohio, about growing up the son of Italian immigrants, about how his father, Gaetano, had worked himself to exhaustion as a barber, and his mother, Angela, had taken in sewing and laundry to make ends meet. My mother, Dean said, his voice softer now, more intimate. She was the strongest person I ever knew. She came to America not speaking a word of English. She worked her fingers to the bone. And you know what she always told me? She said, Dino, it doesn't matter what you do in life. What matters is how you treat people when nobody's watching. That's character. The audience was transfixed. This wasn't entertainer Dean Martin. This was Dino Crocetti, the barber's son from Ohio, sharing something real. That's when Vincent struck. Dean! His voice boomed across the showroom. Your mama taught you about character? That's rich. Maybe she should have taught you that Vegas doesn't run on character. It runs on knowing who's asked to kiss. Time stop. It wasn't just what Vincent said. It was how he said it. The sneering contempt. The deliberate disrespect. The calculated insult designed not just to mock, but to humiliate. In the audience, women gasped. Men shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The band members exchanged glances, unsure whether to keep playing. The spotlight operator kept the light on Dean, but you could see his hand shaking slightly. Everyone in that room understood what had just happened. Vincent DeLuca hadn't just heckled a performer. He'd insulted a man's mother. In Italian-American culture, in any decent culture, that was crossing a line drawn in blood. But more than that, everyone knew who Vincent was. This wasn't just some drunk being rude. This was a man with power, real power, the kind of power that could make careers disappear and people along with him. Dean stood at the microphone. The song had ended. The music had stopped, and now there was only silence. Hundreds of people holding their breath, waiting to see how this would unfold. Would Dean back down? Save face by ignoring it, pretending he hadn't heard? That would keep him safe, keep his Vegas career intact. But it would also mark him as someone who could be pushed around, who'd let his mother be disrespected to save his own skin. Or would he fight back? Match aggression with aggression? That would preserve his dignity in the moment, but it could start a war with a man who'd literally kill people for less. Vincent didn't make idle threats, and Vegas was his playground. Dean stood there, and the seconds stretched into infinity. The response that changed everything. When Dean finally spoke, his voice was so quiet that people in the back rows leaned forward to hear. But somehow, that quiet voice carried to every corner of that packed showroom. "Sir," Dean said, "I want to thank you for bringing up my mother." Vincent smirked. His crew chuckled. They thought Dean was about to apologize, to grovel. They'd won. They had no idea what was coming. "I want to thank you," Dean continued, "because my mother is the perfect person to talk about right now. She's the perfect example of what I'm trying to say." Dean's posture was relaxed, but his eyes, those eyes that usually sparkle with mischief, were serious now. Focused. He wasn't angry. He wasn't scared. He was simply present, fully there, in that moment. "My mother came to this country when she was 19, Dean said. She left everything she knew, her home, her family, her language, and came to a place where she was a stranger. She worked harder than anyone I've ever known. She cleaned houses. She took in laundry. She did whatever it took to help my father build a life for us." The room was absolutely silent now. People weren't just listening. They were hanging on every word. "And some of the people she worked for," Dean continued, "they treated her beautifully. They recognized her as a fellow human being who was working hard, trying to build something better for her children. They spoke to her with respect. They valued her labor. They saw her dignity." Dean paused, letting that sink in. "But others," he said, his voice still calm, still measured, "others treated her like she was invisible, like because she spoke with an accent, because she worked with her hands, because she needed the money, she didn't deserve basic human decency. They were dismissive. They were rude. They acted like their money made them better than her." Vincent's smirk was fading. He could sense the trap closing, but he couldn't see how yet. "And you know what my mother told me about those people?" Dean asked. She said, "Dino, when people are cruel to those who have less power than them, it's not because they're strong. It's because they're weak. Truly strong people don't need to make others feel small, to feel big themselves." You could hear a pin drop. 400 people, motionless. "She taught me," Dean said, "that real power isn't about intimidation. Real strength isn't about making people afraid of you. Real class is about how you treat the person who can do absolutely nothing for you. That's the measure of character." Dean's eyes were locked on Vincent now. "So when you sit there and mock my mother, when you try to belittle the woman who taught me everything about dignity and respect, you're actually proving her point. You're showing everyone in this room that you need to insult a deceased woman to feel powerful. You need to mock someone's mother to get attention." The words hung in the air like smoke. "Now, You said my mother should have taught me that Vegas runs on knowing who's asked to kiss. Dean continued. Let me tell you what my mother actually taught me about how the world works. She taught me that yes, there are people with money and power who think that's all that matters. People who believe that having connections and leverage means they can treat others however they want. Dean took a step forward on the stage. But she also taught me that those people are missing something fundamental. See, Vegas doesn't run on fear. Vegas runs on people. The dealers who show up for every shift, the waitresses who serve drinks with a smile, the janitors who clean these rooms at 3 a.m, the performers who give everything they have night after night. Vegas runs on the dignity and hard work of people who deserve respect, not because of their power, but because they're human beings doing their jobs. Vincent's face had gone from smug to confused to something else now, something harder to read. My mother understood something crucial, Dean said. She understood that you can have all the money in the world, all the power in the world, all the connections in the world, and still be fundamentally empty if you don't have character. And character isn't about how you treat people who can help you. It's about how you treat people who can't. Dean's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath now. Not anger, steel. So when you mock her teachings, when you suggest that her values about respect and dignity are naive, you're telling everyone here, that you think power without character is enough, that intimidation without honor is sufficient, that making people afraid of you is the same as earning their respect. The showroom felt like a cathedral now, sacred, profound. And sir, Dean said quietly, that doesn't make you look powerful. That makes you look like someone who's forgotten what actually matters. Someone who's confused fear with respect. Someone who's lost sight of the difference between being feared and being worthy. Dean let that sit for a moment. Here's what I'm going to do, he finally said. I'm going to honor my mother's memory by continuing to treat everyone in this room, including you, with the dignity she taught me every person deserves. Even when they haven't earned it. Even when they've shown they don't understand it. Because that's what she would want. That's what real strength looks like. Dean turned to his bandleader. Let's pick it back up with Volare, shall we? Something light. The music started. Dean sang, his voice as smooth and effortless as ever. But everything had changed. Vincent sat at his table, visibly shaken. His crew was silent, avoiding eye contact with each other. The people at surrounding tables were looking at Vincent with expressions that ranged from pity to contempt. Vincent had walked into Flamingo that night as a powerful man, someone to be feared and deferred to. In the space of 5 minutes, Dean Martin had held up a mirror and shown everyone what he really was. Not through anger, not through threats, through simple, devastating truth. The transformation of the room. The rest of Dean's set played out in a way that defied explanation. The energy in the room had shifted fundamentally. Where before there had been the typical Vegas showroom atmosphere. People drinking, talking quietly during songs, treating performance as sophisticated background entertainment. Now, there was something approaching reverence. Dean hadn't just defended his mother's honor. He'd articulated something that everyone in that room had felt but couldn't express. How many of them had worked service jobs? How many had been treated poorly by people with power? How many had experienced the casual cruelty that comes from someone who thinks money or connections make them superior? When Dean finished his set 45 minutes later, the applause wasn't just enthusiastic. It was thunderous. People stood, not the polite standing ovation you get because it's expected, but a genuine eruption of respect and appreciation. They weren't just applauding a performance. They were applauding what Dean had done, what he'd said, how he'd stood up to power without becoming what he opposed. Vincent remained seated, staring at his drink. His crew stood and clapped because everyone else was standing, but there was no enthusiasm in it. They looked lost, like men who'd walked into a situation they thought they understood and discovered they understood nothing at all. Dean took his bows, waved at the crowd, and left the stage. But the audience didn't leave. They stayed in their seats, talking animatedly, replaying what they just witnessed. This wasn't just going to be a story they'd tell tomorrow. This was going to be a story they'd tell for the rest of their lives. In the bar adjacent to the showroom, the conversations were intense. A blackjack dealer who'd been in the audience said to anyone who'd listen, "Did you see that?" He didn't back down, but he didn't attack either. He just spoke truth. A waitress who'd served Vincent his drinks shook her head in wonder. "I've worked this room for 8 years. I've seen singers, comedians, dancers, you name it. I've never seen anything like what just happened." A pit boss who'd watched Vincent throw his weight around Vegas for 2 decades muttered into a scotch, "About time someone said it. About damn time." But the most interesting reaction came from people in Vincent's world. At a corner table, 2 men who worked as muscle for a competing family were talking in low voices. "Did you hear what he said? About real power being how you treat people who can't do nothing for you." "Yeah, made me think about some things. Made me think about my mother, too. She would have liked that Dean Martin." "Mine, too. She always said the same thing. Being tough don't mean being cruel." Word spread through the casino like wildfire. Within an hour, people who hadn't been in the showroom knew the story. By midnight, it had reached every major hotel on the Strip. By morning, it would be the talk of the entire city. The confrontation that wasn't. Dean was in his dressing room, loosening his bow tie and pouring himself a genuine drink. Not the tea used on stage, when there was a knock on the door. His manager, a nervous man named Sidney, answered it and immediately went pale. "Mr. Martin, Vincent DeLuca wants to speak with you. He's outside." The 2 other people in the room, Dean's piano player and his assistant, exchanged worried glances. Sidney's hands were actually shaking. "He's alone?" Dean asked calmly. "No, his guys are with him, but they're keeping back. Dean, maybe we should call security." "Maybe you shouldn't." "It's fine, Sid," Dean said. "I'll talk to him." "Dean, this is Vincent DeLuca. The man's killed people. You just embarrassed him in front of 400 witnesses. You can't." Dean put a hand on Sidney's shoulder. "If he wanted to hurt me, he wouldn't knock on the dressing room door. Trust me on this." Dean walked out into the hallway that led to the back entrance. Vincent was there, leaning against the wall, his crew maintaining a respectful distance. The big man looked different somehow. Smaller, maybe, or maybe just more human. They looked at each other for a long moment. Then Vincent spoke. "That was some speech." "It wasn't a speech," Dean replied. "It was the truth. You made me look like a fool in there." "No," Dean said evenly. "You made yourself look foolish. I just didn't pretend I didn't notice." Vincent absorbed this. He pulled out a cigarette, lit it, took a long drag. "You know what my first thought was? When you were up there saying all that about your mother, about character, about real power." Dean waited. "My first thought was, this guy's got balls. My second thought was, he's gonna get himself killed talking like that. My third thought..." Vincent paused, looking at the glowing end of his cigarette. "My third thought was, my mother used to say the exact same thing." Dean nodded slowly. "Most mothers do. Yeah, most mothers do." Vincent took another drag. "Maria DeLuca came over from Sicily when she was 16, worked as a seamstress in a garment factory, died when I was 24, before I really got into this life. I'm sorry for your loss." "Don't be. It was 30 years ago." Vincent looked at Dean. "But you know what? She would have hated what I became. She would have been ashamed. All that stuff you said up there about how treating people badly when you got power over them is weakness, she used to say that, almost word for word. It's a wisdom a lot of mothers share," Dean said. Vincent laughed, but it was a bitter sound. "You know what's funny? I spent the last 30 years thinking I had power because people feared me, because I could make things happen, because I could hurt people who crossed me. And then some crooner stands on a stage and makes me realize I've been confusing fear with respect this whole time. I wasn't trying to." "Yes, you were," Vincent interrupted. "And you were right, too. What I said about your mother, that was out of line. Way out of line. I was drunk and showing off and trying to remind everyone who the tough guy in the room was. And instead, you showed everyone who the strong man in the room was. And it wasn't me." Dean didn't respond. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let someone finish their thought. I came back here thinking I was going to threaten you, Vincent continued. Gonna tell you how things work in Vegas, how you don't disrespect me like that. But then I remembered something my mother said once. She said, Vincent, you can make people fear you, but you can't make them respect you. Respect has to be earned. Vincent dropped his cigarette and crushed it under his shoe. You earned my respect tonight, Dean. You stood there and spoke truth to me without being cruel about it. You defended your mother without attacking mine. You made me look at myself without humiliating me. That takes more guts than anything I've ever done in my life. I appreciate that, Dean said quietly. Don't appreciate it yet. I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to understand it. Vincent stepped closer. You and me were square. What happened tonight, it's done. You won't have any trouble from me or anyone connected to me in this town. You got my word on that, and my word still means something. Thank you. But Dean, Vincent's eyes locked with his. Not everyone in my world is going to feel the way I do. Some people are going to hear about tonight and think you need to be taught a lesson, made an example of. I can protect you from my people, but I can't protect you from everyone. You understand? I understand. And I'll deal with whatever comes, Dean said, because some things are more important than staying safe. My mother's memory is one of those things. Vincent stared at him for a long moment, then nodded. She raised you right. He extended his hand. We're good, you and me. Dean shook it. Vincent turned to leave, then stopped. That thing you said about real power being lifting people up instead of tearing them down, I'm going to try to remember that. Can't promise I'll change overnight. Can't promise I'll change at all. But I'll try to remember. He walked away, his crew falling in behind him. Dean watched them go, then went back into his dressing room, where Sydney was practically having a nervous breakdown. What happened? Is everything okay? Did he threaten you? He apologized. Dean said simply, He what? In his way, he apologized. The ripples that became waves. The story of that night at the Flamingo spread through Las Vegas with a speed and intensity that surprised even the most jaded observers. By the next afternoon, it was the talk of every casino, every showroom, every back room where deals were made. But what spread wasn't the version you might expect. It wasn't Dean Martin insults mob boss or singer picks fight with dangerous man. The story that spread was more nuanced, more powerful. Dean Martin spoke truth about character and changed a mob boss's mind. Other performers heard the story and felt something shift. If Dean Martin could stand up to Vincent DeLuca with nothing but words and truth, maybe they could find their own courage. Maybe they didn't have to accept being treated poorly. Maybe dignity mattered more than safety. A young comedian named Jackie Leonard had been scheduled to perform at the Flamingo 2 nights later. During his set, a drunk millionaire kept interrupting, making crude jokes, being deliberately disruptive. In the old days, meaning before Dean's confrontation, Jackie would have either ignored it or tried to outcrude the heckler. Instead, Jackie stopped his routine. Sir, he said calmly, I recently heard a story about how we treat each other, about what real strength looks like, and I realize that I don't need to meet your rudeness with more rudeness. But I also don't need to pretend it's not happening. So I'm going to ask you politely, please let me do my job and let these folks enjoy their evening. The drunk millionaire surprisingly shut up, and Jackie finished his set to strong applause. Afterwards, 3 other performers asked him what had given him the courage to handle it that way. Dean Martin, Jackie said. Dean Martin showed us how it's done. This pattern repeated itself across Vegas. Performers found their voices. Service staff found their dignity. People who'd spent years accepting disrespect because that was just how Vegas work started to realize that maybe it didn't have to be that way. It didn't fix everything. Vegas was still Vegas, and power dynamics still existed. But something had shifted. A line had been drawn, and that line said, you can have power, you can have money, but you can't use them as an excuse to treat people poorly. 3 weeks after the incident, Dean was having dinner at the Sands with Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr. Frank brought it up. I heard about what happened with Vincent DeLuca. Yeah, Dean said casually. Yeah, and I gotta tell you, Pally, I'm not sure if that was the bravest thing I've ever heard or the dumbest. Maybe both, Dean said with a small smile. Sammy, who'd faced his own battles with racism and discrimination despite his immense talent, leaned forward. What you said up there, Dean, about how people treat others when they have power, that resonated. That really resonated. My mother's wisdom, not mine, Dean replied. Doesn't matter whose wisdom it was originally. Frank said, matters that you had the guts to speak it when it counted. They sat in silence for a moment. Three talented men, who'd each face their own battles with power and pride. You know what the funny thing is? Dean said finally, I didn't plan it. I didn't walk on stage that night thinking, tonight's the night I'm going to take on a mob boss with philosophy. It just happened. He insulted my mother, and I couldn't let that stand. Everything else just flowed from that. That's what makes it real, Sammy said. If you planned it, it would have been a speech. But you didn't plan it. You just spoke from the heart about what mattered to you. That's why it worked. The legacy of one night. Years later, in 1968, Dean was interviewed for a television special. The interviewer, a young journalist eager to make his mark, asked about Vincent DeLuca. Mr. Martin, there's a famous story about you and a mobster at the Flamingo in 1957. Is it true? Did it really happen the way people say? Dean smiled. It happened, though I'm sure the story's gotten bigger in the telling. What made you respond the way you did? Most people would have either ignored the insult or escalated to violence. Dean thought about it. When someone insults your mother, your first instinct is anger. You want to hurt them back. But I realized in that moment that getting angry would be giving him what he wanted. He was trying to provoke me, to show everyone he had power over me. So instead of reacting, I responded. What's the difference? Reacting is emotional. It's immediate. It's what your hurt feelings tell you to do. Responding is thoughtful. It's about choosing how you want to handle a situation based on your values, not your emotions. The interviewer leaned forward. Did you change his mind? Do you think what you said actually affected him? I don't know if I changed his mind, Dean said honestly, but I think I reminded him of something he already knew. Something his own mother probably taught him, and maybe that reminder made a difference. That's all we can really hope for, to remind people of the better versions of themselves. Dean Martin died in 1995. In his personal effects, his children found a worn photograph of his mother, Angela, and beside it, a note in his own handwriting. It read, Mom's lessons. Treat everyone with dignity, especially those who can't help you. Real power is being kind when you can be cruel. Character matters more than any success. Never let anyone disrespect family, but don't become what you oppose. That note, written sometime in the years after the Flamingo incident, had clearly been referenced many times. The paper was creased, the edges soft from handling. It had been a reminder, a touchstone, a way of keeping his mother's wisdom close. The story of the night Vincent DeLuca insulted Dean Martin's mother isn't really about the insult. It's not even really about the response. As powerful as that response was, it's about something deeper. The choice we all face when someone tries to bring us down to their level. We can meet cruelty with cruelty. We can respond to disrespect with disrespect. We can let our anger drive our actions and our hurt feelings dictate our behavior. That's the easy path. That's the natural path. Or we can do what Dean Martin did. We can stay calm when everything in us wants to rage. We can speak truth when lies will be safer. We can offend what matters without attacking what doesn't. We can show people the difference between power and strength, between fear and respect, between dominating and leading. Dean Martin's mother, Angela, came to America with nothing but hope and character. She worked impossible hours for insufficient pay. She raised her children to understand that dignity isn't something you have. It's something you practice. She taught her son that true strength isn't about how hard you can hit, but about how you conduct yourself when someone tries to hit you. And on one night in March 1957, in a crowded showroom at the Flamingo Hotel, Dean Martin proved he'd learned those lessons well. Vincent DeLuca died in 1974. According to people who knew him in his final years, he had mellowed, not reformed. A man doesn't undo 30 years of being what Vincent was, but mellowed. He was less quick to anger, more thoughtful in his dealings, more likely to show unexpected kindness. Once, in 1972, a young musician who was being hassled by a casino owner for refusing to play an extra set without pay came to Vincent for help. The old mob boss listened to the story, then said something the young man never forgot. "Kid, let me tell you something I learned too late in life. Power without character is just bullying. And bullying doesn't make you strong. It makes you weak. You stand your ground. Don't let anyone make you compromise your dignity." The young musician, confused by this unexpected wisdom, asked, "Where'd you learn that?" Vincent smiled. "From a singer who was braver than any tough guy I ever knew." He never said Dean Martin's name, but he didn't have to. The lesson Dean taught that night wasn't just for Vincent DeLuca. It was for everyone who heard about it, everyone who faced their own bullies, their own battles, their own moments of choosing between the easy wrong and the difficult right. It was a lesson about the fact that speaking truth doesn't require volume, that defending what matters doesn't require violence, that true strength is measured not by what you can take from others, but by what you refuse to surrender in yourself. Dean Martin understood what his mother had taught him, that dignity is a choice. Every single day, in every single interaction, we choose whether to conduct ourselves with grace or give in to our baser instincts. He chose grace. Even when grace was hard, even when grace was dangerous, even when grace would have been easier to abandon. And in making that choice, in speaking those words, in holding up that mirror to a powerful man and showing him what he'd become, Dean Martin did something remarkable. He showed us all that there's a better way. You don't have to meet cruelty with cruelty. You don't have to respond to disrespect with disrespect. You can stand your ground while standing for something. You can be strong without being hard. You can defend yourself without attacking others. That's what Angela Crocetti taught her son. And on one night in 1957, Dean Martin taught it to the world. The line between power and strength, between dominating and leading, between making people fear you and earning their respect. That line exists in all of us. Every day, we choose which side of that line to stand on. Dean Martin showed us what happens when you choose right, when you choose truth, when you choose, above all else, to honor the people who made you who you are by living according to the values they taught you. That's not just courage. That's character. And that's a lesson that never gets old, never stops being relevant, never ceases to matter. 70 years later, we're still telling the story, still learning from it, still trying to live up to the example Dean Martin set that night. Because some moments transcend their time. Some words echo across decades. Some acts of courage inspire generations. And sometimes, just sometimes, a son honors his mother by showing the world what she taught him. That real power is not about who you can hurt, but about who you can help. Not about who you can tear down, but about who you can lift up. Not about being feared, but about being worthy of respect. Dean Martin's mother gave him many gifts. But the greatest gift she gave him, and through him, gave to all of us, was the understanding that strength without character is just force, and force without love is just violence. On March 14th, 1957, Dean Martin turned that understanding into action, and in doing so, he changed more than one mobster's mind. He changed what was possible.